Unit 6. So you'll go to your courses, select in your Common Core classes there. Go down and look at the Unit 6 folder there. And what I have is your video lessons, which you probably found, which is obviously where this video is. The notes in case you lose your copy, and some classwork that we're going to be doing in case you're absent. So that's a place that you can always go and get your answers or get your copies. Here we have some Khan Academy videos, and then basically we have the learning targets here. And also what I'm going to have you do this time is when the learning targets open up here, we have the learning targets like normal, but then I've also put down some vocabulary terms that you're going to want to write down on your target sheets. So definitely be doing this as we're looking at some examples. Really today the only thing you want to add in is distributive property, just some examples of that. This is one of my favorite things about math. This is one of the things that you will see happen in every single math class from now on. You will have to do the distributive property in every math class from now on. And that's really something that your elementary teachers could have said about addition and subtraction. And it's such second nature to us now. We know exactly what to do whenever you see adding and subtracting questions. So this will definitely become part of your routine, but it might take a little while to get used to. So the distributive property comes about because we have this thing called order of operations. And the old way of doing this first question here, 8 times the quantity 2 plus 4, we would do parentheses first. We'd think about PEMDAS. Parentheses would be first. So we would go ahead and add together 2 plus 4. And 2 plus 4 is 6. So then we do 8 times 6 and get 48. So you're probably saying, why do we need another way? Well, the reason we need a new way is because eventually we're going to see, well, not eventually, in about a minute here, we're going to see examples with variables. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So doing this way, here's our new way of doing the distributive property here. We're not going to go ahead and add together the 2 and the 4 right here, even though it makes sense to do that. What we're going to do is take this 8 out in front, and it really means 8 times whatever's inside. So what we're going to do is actually multiply the 8 by both things inside. Okay. And before we do that, I want to look at an example here. I moved into my house about 3 years ago now, and this is my house. And next door, we'll squeeze in my neighbor's house here. Here's my neighbor's house. Okay, so when we moved in, here's me, and here's my wife. Apparently she has a much bigger head than I do. But there's my wife. And what we did was when we got here to our house, we met our neighbors next door. Our neighbors were Tom and Linda and their son Pat. So what we did was I went next door and I met Tom. I introduced myself. I shook hands with Tom. I met Linda and I met Pat. I distributed myself. I introduced myself to Tom, Linda, and Pat all separately. And then later on, what my wife did when she was around and I wasn't home, she went over and met our neighbors as well. So she went over and said, hey, I'm Kayla. Hi, Tom. Kayla says, hi, Linda. And then hi, Pat. They introduced themselves to each person inside. So this is kind of my way of explaining it to you, that I'm introducing the 8 to the 2 and the 4. And we're going to actually draw these arrows. So what I want you to do is draw the arrow from the 8 to the 2 and the 8 to the 4. That's how we're going to do the distributive property. So one more time, I'll do that for you. We're going to do 8 times 2 and then 8 times 4. So I'm actually going to write that first one out. 8 times 2, bring down my plus sign, and then 8 times 4. So now we know that 8 times 2 is 16, and 8 times 4 is 32. And now we can add those together. 16 and 32 is 48. And notice we got the same answer both times. So you're probably saying, why do we need to do all of that? And here's exactly why. If we had a problem like this, 7 times x plus 4, there is no way to add together x and 4, because they're not like terms, and that's something we're going to talk about a little bit more tomorrow. But for now, it's enough to know that we can't add together x and 4. It's like trying to add together bananas and pineapples. They're not the same thing. We have to think about them separately. So we can't add together x and 4. So since we can't do that, we're going to have to go back outside and do the distributive property. So let's write a little note there. We can't add together x and 4. We ran into a problem. So here's what we're going to do for our new way. We're going to use that distributive property. Think of it as I'm the 7, and I'm going to go inside into new house and meet x and 4. So draw those arrows in there on your paper too. We're going to do 7 times x and 7 times 4. And now you're probably saying, what is 7 times x? Well, it's just going to be 7x. And then we'll bring down our plus sign. And then we got to do 7 times the 4 again. So 7 times 4. I'm going to write that out and then simplify it. So 7x is just 7x. And 7 times 4 is 28. Now at this point, we cannot add together 7x and 28. It's just that way. We can't add them together and make it 35x because one has an x and one doesn't. So this is our simplified answer. Alright, so here's a little bit more about the distributive property. We have a couple examples that we looked at. But first of all, let's look at the numbers way. Just give me another example. Let's say it's 3 times, 2 plus 6. So rather than adding the 2 and the 6, we're going to take what's outside and distribute it in. We're going to do 3 times 2, bring down our plus sign, and then do 3 times 6, that next arrow there. Let's do that in a different color so you can see. The second arrow, 3 times 6. A lot of people actually say 3 plus 6 and get 9, but that's not what we want to do. 3 times 6 will give us 18 there. So when we combine all this together, we get 6 plus 18, which is 24. So now with algebra, here's just some notation for letters, and we'll go ahead and do this distributive property here. It's going to be a times b plus a times c. We'll take what's outside and distribute it in. The a meets the b and the a meets the c. Now you will also see, and not too often, but you will see distributive property with the variable or the letter or the number on the right side instead of the left side. And it's actually the same thing. We're just going to kind of distribute it the other way through. Again, you won't see this very often, but the a is going to meet the b. Bring that plus sign out. And then the a is going to meet the c. Simple as that. We'll also do some with subtractions in them. So once again, the a is going to meet both the b and the c in here. A meets the b, bring down that minus sign, and then a meets the c. Remember, there's all multiplication in between these variables. And the last one here, distributing an a through the other side, a meets the b, and then bring down that minus sign, and then a meets the c. So that might not help you too much, but that's just a format or a systematic way of doing it. Now I actually do this a lot when you guys are doing math questions like 4 times 28 and you rush to your calculator. While you're rushing to your calculator, some of you, what I do is I go ahead and do it in my head. And I actually do the distributive property by breaking up 28 into 20 and 8. I actually break it down in my head to 20 and 8. And what I do is I distribute this all in my head. I just say, what's 4 times 20? And I know that that is 80. And 4 times 8 is 32. So then in my head, I add together 80 and 32. And then I get 112 pretty quickly. And a lot of you guys are actually pretty good at that too. So that's just a little trick you can always use. So here's a couple examples of the distributive property. We're going to look down and go through A, B, or A and C. And then I'll have you try B and D. So here's A. We're going to take that 8 and meet it or distribute it to the 3 and the 5. The 8's going to meet the 3, the 8's going to meet the 5. And if you'd like to do your arrows one at a time, that's fine. Here the 8 and the 3, we're going to multiply them. And then I'll do it in a different color. 8 times 5 is 40. So now when we do this, 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 5 is 40. And now we can add these together. 24 and 40 is 64. Part C here. We're going to take the 3. 3 meets the x. And then the 3 meets the 5. it's going to be 3 times x, and then 3 meets the 5, plus 3 times 5. So now we have to simplify here. We can't do anything with 3x, and we know 3 times 5 is 15. That's actually our answer right there. We can't do anything else other than that. Go ahead and try B, and see if you can do D too. It's a little bit more difficult, but go ahead and give it a try and we'll go over it. If you want to, you can think about it as -2 in front instead, and then 14 minus C if you like. So push pause and give that a try. Alright, so let's finish these up here and go over our answers. When we distribute here, 4 times 6, we do the minus sign, and 4 times 2. We get 24 minus 8, which is 16. Final answer there. On this one, we distribute the -2 through, and this is a harder example. So if you didn't get this one, that's okay. But we're going to do -2 times 14. And we're going to bring down our minus sign, actually. And then once we bring down that minus sign, what's left is just -2 times C. So let me highlight what we have left here. We have -2 times C. So here's the -2. And then we're multiplying it by just this C, because we've already brought down the negative sign. So it'll help if I put that in parentheses. We're just going to do -2. Oh, I should do it in green so you can see it. We're just going to do -2 times C there. So this is -28. And then minus -2C. And we remember a little bit about algebra rules. 2 negatives in a row there becomes -28 plus 2C. And that's our final answer for that one. All right, last part here. Just a couple more questions. We're going to go ahead and try these two here. We're going to go ahead and distribute 4.2, a decimal, through. And it's the same process, really. Not much different. We're going to do 4.2 times 5 plus 4.2 times C. 4.2 times 5 ends up being 21. And you can do that on your calculator. And then 4.2 times C is as it is. We can't say anything else except for it's just 4.2 times C. So that is our answer. And again, we can't add the 21 and the 4.2, and we'll get into that a little bit more tomorrow. All right, part F here. What we have is -2 times 6y. We're going to multiply the numbers there and bring down that minus sign. And then we have -2, we'll do that in a different color, -2 times the 4. Okay, and being very systematic and neat about this is very important. -2 times 6y is -12y. Bring down that minus. -2 times 4 is -8. And we got to clean this up a little bit. 2 negatives in a row turns into a positive, an addition question there. So this is really -12y plus 8. And as you do more and more of these, you'll see that you'll see this pattern a lot, where you have a negative here and a negative here. So you're thinking of negative times a negative is a positive. And if you see that pattern right away, go for it. Okay, don't let me stop you there. Go ahead and push pause, try these last two, and we'll check it and be done. All right, to find the area, we do base times height for a rectangle. So for this, we're doing the 7 times, and it's helpful to put this in parentheses because we have to multiply the whole thing by 7, 2x plus 5. So to do this, we're going to distribute. We got to take the 7 times the 2x, bring down that plus sign, and then do the 7 times the 5. When we simplify this, we get 14x plus 35. And the last one. Thanks for sticking with me. I know my limit's been 15 minutes, and this one turned into 16. Sorry about that. For the triangle, we're doing 1/2 base times height. So we're going to do 1/2 times our base times our height. So that's kind of the formula there. And we're actually going to do this part first. Half of 6 is 3. And then go ahead and distribute through. 3 times 3y is 9y. Bring down that minus sign. And 3 times 5 is 15.